the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics certainly does not consider translation and interpreting a problem solved by AI. Welcome, everyone, to SlaterPod. Hello, Esther.
Hi, Florian.
All right, so we have only 2 weeks left for the biggest SlaterCon ever in London. Well over 150 people. Let's see if we can fill the entire room. I think we can. I think it's going to be about 180. Let's see where this takes us. So you don't have to travel. That's good.
That is good. We like that. Well, if you count the tube as traveling, then a little bit of travel, but nothing cross borders this time.
The tube. Indeed, I missed the tube. Only used it 1 year in my year in London. Central Line, Bethnal Green to Oxford Circus. Yeah, that was just one trip. All right, so yeah, SlaterCon London, only 2 weeks left. Go register. We may sell out, so you want to go and get the ticket now. Today on the podcast, we will be talking about the US government's contrarian take on language jobs. Talk about why Reddit thinks translation is super important to them. The big unlock, they call it. I want to discuss more AI dubbing. I'm so sorry. I know this might not be everybody's topic, but I love AI dubbing. I want to talk more about it. And then you're going to talk about a bunch of transactions in the M&A corner. So we were at Gala in Valencia early last week, and I had the pleasure to add half a week of holidays as well in that beautiful city. So how was your impression of Gala?
It was good. Yeah. Nice city, nice venue, good weather, good people. So yeah, all in all, very enjoyable.
Got to hand it to the team. I think it was a record turnout for them. I think they had over 500 people, going to that city. So really kudos to the Gala team putting this on every year. I was there on Monday, very busy, listened to a number of presentations by Translated, by John Tinsley gave a great presentation from Translated. Also sat in on the Voice Seat presentation, which we had Andrea Ballista on the podcast as well, and a bunch of other things. So yeah, great conference. Kudos to them. And I think next year they're going to go to Montreal. Montreal, right? Same as ALC. ALC is also going to Montreal this year.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to be going to Montreal. We're going to do the ALC survey again, and then we're going to go to Montreal. And that one is a week after our very own, just to kind of continue to talk about conferences here, that is a week after our own Silicon Valley conference, which is going to happen on September 5th in Menlo Park. So we are going to be putting up the website soon, so you can go and register. Go there, register soon. I think it's going to be live on Monday. We got a great hotel and everything. I might have spoken about this before, but let's give us another few days. All right, so staying in the United States, the U.S. government, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics certainly does not consider translation and interpreting a problem solved by AI because they continue to put out their estimates about job growth. And so they are estimating that by 2032, the number of translators and interpreters will rise by about 3% or 4% every year to, is it every year? I'm not sure. Maybe just 4% to 71,700. So translators and interpreters in the US, 71,700. It's interesting, though, that they have not adapted the definition of what a translator and interpreter is. Do you see that there? What do they say?
Yeah, interpreters and translators convert information from one language into another language.
Yeah, that's quite basic, right? So no AI angle there.
You have to feel for them, though. I mean, how many definitions must they have had to have written at some point in terms of like how many jobs and job types are they tracking?
You're right. And now with all these large language models and the way they're changing the job landscape in general, like what are you going to do? Like, we're struggling.
You probably have to update sort of, 5,000 plus definitions across whatever the jobs they're tracking.
Like, so if you are a linguist, an expert linguist, and you spend most of your time interacting with, machine translation or other language AI, like, what do you call yourself? And that's not a problem that only, the US Bureau of Labor Statistics works on, but many others. Like, what do you call? Like, are you still a translator? We had RWS CEO on stage in Zurich saying goodbye translators, hello language experts. But language expert is such a broad term that you probably, you'd struggle if you're at a statistics bureau to kind of define it.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think we have to understand that this, at least in terms of what the BLS is tracking, a lot of the translators in this context will be working on post-editing, or at least, on AI content. But that's not to say that they're not translators. Most would, even if I spent sort of 80% of my time post-editing, I'd probably still consider myself to be a translator. If I had trained as a translator, if I came about it by a different route, potentially not, but I would probably view myself as a translator still and describe it that way to my friends and family.
Yeah, that's a challenge though for a lot of the universities as well, because I think they're really struggling to attract new students into, degrees that are called translation, because especially if you're, 20 years old, you probably don't think of it as a long-term career. So, that's obviously opening up a whole separate discussion, but it's just interesting that they keep projecting like these things far into the future, like 8 years out, and don't update their definition of it.
I don't think it's all that bullish. I mean, they're saying 3,000 new jobs over a space of 10 years, because the estimates were from 2022 to 2032. Maybe they've already added those 3,000, and maybe, there's no growth in the next 8 years.
But it's contrarian. Okay, I guess the headline that we wrote, the contrarian element is that they retain that job description right now, because as Slater, we're looking at the entire industry, and we're looking at project managers and, whatever, linguistic AI managers and, post editors and all of that. But like, how many people out there would argue that the core translator and interpreter number of jobs in that was gonna rise? That's a harder sell than just kind of taking this broader look at the industry.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think especially if you're looking at what's happening in the universities, in terms of fully trained professional translators and interpreters. Yeah.
Now the question is, if you just teach post editing and you kind of lack the core training in language, it's just like that question boggles my mind. Like, I think you can overtrain on the tech, but if nobody is able to actually do the core writing and like having that human baseline, if you kind of give up on the human baseline, there still needs to be people that like actually, care about and sweat every little linguistic detail.
But I think there's a reason as well that the editor job, even when we weren't using machine translation as standard in the industry, the flow would be translator, editor, or translator, proofreader. The role of editor, though, was always, typically a more advanced and more experienced translator. So the point being that you need, as we've said for many years now, that you need to be a very good translator to be able to be a good editor.
I hated it so much. We called it QA, and I really didn't like it. I wanted to do the translation myself, because like I got these like half-baked translations from certain freelance. I'm like, oh my God, no. And then I would it was the same freelancer, and I would keep changing the same things and keep rewriting, and there was just no improvement. I would try to do the adaptive thing and
there was no iterative
there was no iterative learning. There was no reinforcement learning by human feedback. It was like no change. It just churned out the same thing again and again. All right, look, they also see, the BLS sees 7,200 openings for interpreters and translators each year. They did say that a lot of the openings would be created by people retiring. Actually, they specified that. So they do acknowledge that it's probably the age average is probably a little higher than for some other jobs. Anyway, let's totally switch topic. Super interesting piece of information we came across today. Yesterday, Reddit, the social media, I don't even know what to call it. I'm not really on Reddit. Are you on Reddit?
I'm not on Reddit. I occasionally, come across Reddit.
I come across Reddit screenshots on X,
Ah, okay.
but never, I haven't spent any time on Reddit. Anyway, Reddit went public. So they were, I think they went public maybe a couple of months ago. And now they had their first earnings call for the first quarter 2024. Just quick reminder, Reddit founded 2005 by Steve Hoffman and Alexis Ohanian. I think Alexis Ohanian is now like an investor. He's doing all kinds of other stuff, but Steve Hoffman's still the CEO. Then they started this like Ask Me Anything thing about 10 years ago. They had this whole Wall Street bets and GameStop thing happening in 2021. And now in 2024, they IPO'd, now traded about $8 billion market cap. And again, now they had their first earnings call with Steve Hoffman. And, we look at these earnings calls from time to time, like when Netflix, publishes something, or maybe Disney, to see if there's some update on dubbing. But like very rarely do we come across something where like translation is like almost the core of the call. Now, in this case, machine translation seems to be really high on Steve Hoffman's priorities in terms of generating growth for Reddit. And if you're going public, the one thing you want to, of course, create is like this growth narrative, right? And so the word machine translation was mentioned 7 times, not in the particularly in the earnings in the release, but in the earnings call, right? When they have to talk to the analysts, it's like a 1-hour conversation. Or first they do an update, and then like the analysts are able to ask questions. And so machine translating the Reddit content and thereby going global, as the CEO said, is like really high on their list. And so, kind of the key points here that they're using machine translation to unlock content primarily in English now. Reddit, I think, is very English-centric. This helps them to accelerate growth in non-English markets. They can then index content in multiple languages, and then Google can index that so they can attract even more traffic. And they can, like they say, it improves usability and accessibility as well. Now, some of these points, we did them using video highlights. That's Mihai's product. That we had Mihai from Video Highlights in the podcast a few weeks ago. So we just stuck in a recording of the call on YouTube and had it summarize it. So it's really useful. You should go and check it out. Now, some key quotes. I'm going to have to read that. I think it's really interesting. So key quotes by the Reddit CEO. They say, and to grow outside the US, we're using machine translation to unlock our mostly English corpus. We believe this will not only drive growth in the near term, but also over time will allow users from all over the world to connect regardless of the languages they speak. So that's a bit blah, blah, but they're using machine translation to unlock their mostly English corpus. And then another one, again, that's when he really is trying to sell the investors on the idea that MT is a growth driver. They're saying, and so the other thing we're looking forward, and I'm quoting again the CEO, to as we go forward is international growth. We're still 50-50 US versus non-US, but our peers are more 80-90, peers being like, I guess, Facebook and, and X, etc., are more 80-90 non-US. And so I think there's a huge opportunity here. I think one of the big unlocks for us in the near to medium term is machine translation.
Not translation.
No, well, machine translation. Well, you don't want to, good luck translating Reddit comments by a human. So we're translating our entire corpus that's today mostly in English and the other languages, and hope that will help accelerate international growth. And then just one more quote. So one of the analysts is asking the CEO about, like, literally the first question is like, hey, can you tell us a bit more about the machine translation tools that you're building, blah, blah, blah. And then the CEO says, so one of the things I think that's most exciting for us with large language model is the ability to do translation at human level quality. I mean, think about that statement. So LLMs, so the CEO of Reddit says one of the most exciting things with LLMs is they can do machine translation at human level quality. I don't know. We don't have to go. There's so many ways you could kind of unpack that statement, but really, like that's the most exciting thing for you with LLMs, like human level machine translation quality. I mean, you know, we've had this discussion many times that, you know, the narrower models are probably still outperforming the LLMs, but it seems like a watershed moment almost when you have the CEO of one of the bigger social networks saying that LLMs are particularly exciting to them because of human level machine translation.
You kind of wonder if this would have been on their radar as a priority and as like oh, hey, this is going to drive growth if it weren't for LLMs.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So that visibility thing.
Yeah, that we talk about a lot. Yeah.
So basically, yeah, now we keep talking about LLMs kind of elevating machine translation to the C level. And here you have, I mean, it can't get much more senior than the CEO. But when they're saying the big unlock, like, is this really the big unlock? Like, I mean, was machine translation the big unlock to international growth for Meta, for Facebook, for X, for, I don't know, TikTok?
I don't know exactly how far back that their language program dates, you know, Facebook, Meta, but in my mind, it's been going for a very long time in multiple languages, like almost as far back as I can remember using Facebook.
Yeah, we had Iris on the podcast, and she's going to speak in London as well. I mean, you know, they've done this from the very early stage.
Yeah, we're talking like 15 plus years probably. So I think at that point it's quite difficult to untangle, right? Whereas this is a big unlock because there's so much content that isn't translated. Whereas I think, you know, I might be wrong, but with Facebook, there was obviously a lot of content happening, but very early on it was translated. So there wouldn't have been that same unlocking or explosion of multiple language content.
I'm just a little bit surprised that you have a company as big as Reddit and going into their very first earnings call, and then like one of the 2 or 3 big things they're dangling out there to investors as a growth strategy is, hey, we're going to machine translate our content now. All right. I mean, we'll take it. We're obviously a language industry podcast, so we feel honored, but or we feel relevant maybe. But like, really?
Frankly, my question, if I was an analyst there, would have been, why haven't you done this before? It's not, you know.
Correct. Exactly. So we needed all those billions from the IPO to now, you know,
to fund the translation.
Yeah, you're right. They were started in 2005. I mean, Facebook was started around that time. Maybe, you know, maybe it's 1 year earlier or something. All right. Well, good luck, Reddit. I hope you choose your machine translation provider wisely, or maybe, you know, you spin up an internal team, establish an internal team, and try to do that. There's certainly a lot going on at Adobe and Microsoft. Let's talk about Adobe first. So we're using, and yeah, now I'm taking a quick detour here to my favorite topic, AI dubbing. So Adobe, and we're using Firefly from Adobe for like content generation, mostly text to image. I think it's actually one of the better tools. And when we go to the website, the Firefly website, which is kind of the whole Gen AI suite from Adobe is kind of under that Firefly brand, maybe. So now they're actually officially teasing what I think is AI dubbing, because, you know, remember we talked about this dub many times, and they kept teasing it, and, you know, it's never been released. But now they're on the front page, they're saying create with generative AI, and then coming soon, so still teasing, generative audio and video. Edit your audio and video content with Firefly, and definitely part of the editing of audio and video content is going to be multilingual. So yeah, I'm waiting. It's the coming soon thing has been there for about 3 weeks.
Just building anticipation.
Building anticipation. Again, you know, let's do this podcast in multiple languages. And then kind of in a similar topic, like apparently according to a website called Windows Reports, Microsoft Edge, a browser I've never used, will now be able to generate kind of a put like an overlay over video. So even over YouTube videos, you can have like an overlay, like an AI dub overlay.
Like a voiceover.
Well, no, like actual Microsoft Edge will have AI generate different voices for dubbing the translation based on who's speaking. So for instance, if a man's speaking in a video, AI will generate a male voice, and if a woman is female. So maybe not lip synced yet, but just kind of, yeah, like a voiceover, right? Like, so you can watch a YouTube video and then the Edge browser on top of it will AI dub it. I mean, it's like one of those kind of browser features. And apparently the guy who tried it posted on X that it broke all the time. So let's see, maybe. And it's only, what is it? German, Spanish, Hindi, Russian, and one more. Cool. All right. So that was the language AI update. And now, Esther, there's been a lot of stuff happening in mergers and acquisitions in the past 3 weeks since we did our last news podcast.
Yeah, there have been quite a lot of goings on in mergers and acquisitions. Obviously, typically acquisitions. So we had news from the US that Argo Translations bought Global Accent Translation Services. Argo being a Chicago-based challenger, sort of mid-sized LSP, acquiring another LSP based in Colorado. The idea here being sort of expanding into the sectors of market research and also outdoor goods translation, which for me seems like a niche, but yeah, great. Fun to translate outdoor goods, I would imagine.
So outdoor goods is...
Maybe I'm totally wrong. Wouldn't it be like sportswear and sort of hiking, skiing, I don't know, all the fun things?
Got to know your hiking gear.
Yeah, so the news was that Jeff Norby, who is the founder of Global Accent, is joining Argo as a senior account executive. So yeah, 2 US companies joining forces over there. Then over in Europe, we had news from LanguageWire that it had acquired WHP International in France. This was completed in early April. WHP founded 3 decades ago, so long-standing France-based translation and localization provider.
Sorry, what does it stand for?
I don't actually know. No, should have maybe researched that, but no, like a lot of these LSPs with 3 letters. Not sure. So yeah, another France-based acquisition for LanguageWire, but in this instance, they were telling us that actually it was the sector expertise that appealed to LanguageWire, and for WHP, this is expertise in software, e-learning, tech doc, and they have a strong focus on XML and DITA, D-I-T-A. DITA, which for those who don't know is Darwin Information Typing Architecture, XML-based content architecture standard. Kind of heavily used in tech doc, software, healthcare, and some other industries as well. Seems to have some proprietary tech, WHP, which will be integrated into LanguageWire's system as well.
Every time I hear DITA, I think of Stuttgart, Germany, because that's where the TECOM happens, and that's where all the DITA, you see like the big booths with all the DITA vendors, and there's this kind of crossover with the language industry, localization industry.
Yeah, but it seems to have real focused sort of expertise in those areas as well. So yeah, interesting acquisition for LanguageWire over in France. Then we had another M&A news piece from TransPerfect that they have acquired Content Lab. This one is a media localization firm based in South Africa with a studio in Cape Town, serving global clients, multiple languages, but obviously also having a focus on some of the local languages like Zulu and Afrikaans. And they told us a focus on into English language talent, obviously being lots of English language speakers there as well. That's of interest to TransPerfect. So yeah, another media localization, dubbing, voiceover, subtitling type acquisition from TransPerfect, but this time in South Africa.
And we got more news from Supertext.
More news from
Supertext.
Supertext.
Yes, more news from Supertext. We spoke at length about the Supertext Tech Shuttle merger, and now there's a spin-off. So there's a lot of corporate stuff going on at Supertext. So Supertext USA is spinning off from the Swiss parent company and becomes, and now we're going to be really careful how I pronounce this, We Are Very, very tough to pronounce for a Swiss.
Very good.
Very good, because the Swiss like to pronounce the V in very, like wary, with, you know,
We're
like
not wary. We're
and
not
we're not
wary.
wary, like not with, not, you know, not like the W pronunciation. We Are Very is the name of that new company.
Also, because there's a leading W with the W, the we,
It's
then you're
killing me.
already primed to pronounce a W.
I'm primed for the, well, yeah, it's killing me as a Swiss speaker. So another Swiss speaker is the guy who's actually started this, Rinaldo Dietziger. So I think he moved to Santa Monica in like 2016, 2017 and started, you know, the Supertext USA, and now they're spinning it off into We Are Very, together with Christy Sakai, who has led Supertext there in the USA since the start, 2016. So yeah, there's go to the website. There's some complicated, like, you know, obviously the Swiss entity owned it, and now they kind of bought it out and did that spin-off. So yeah, interesting new setup. Good luck to We Are Very.
Have to check out their LinkedIn page and, you know, update everything I'm following.
Now, RWS, what happened over there? They announced results and they want to sell part of the business, a small part.
Small part, yeah. This was a trading update that obviously they do fairly regularly as a listed company in the UK. So RWS saying that in the trading update that it plans to dispose of its interest in PatBase, which is a patent search base that they have co-developed with a different company since 2003.
PatBase.
So PatBase, yeah, patent search database. So they've agreed terms for the sale of PatBase that say they're going to receive 30 million GBP, pounds, million cash. And that is expected to complete later this month in May. And then, yeah, elsewhere in the trading update, they're talking about half-year revenue. So this would be from September to the end of March, expecting revenues for the half year to come in at 350 million pounds, around $436 million, and then profit on a pre-tax profit of 45 million pounds or $56 million. So big numbers. Obviously, we're still talking about that this corresponds to roughly a 4% decline in revenue from the first half in 2023, or as they pointed out, like 2% decline if you're looking at the constant organic currency. And also a decline on the adjusted pre-tax profit level of about 17%. So we had lots of explanations as to, you know, bit of a deep dive into what was going on in explanation of some of these declines. They were saying, for example, that some of the typically higher margin businesses had seen a weaker performance during that period, and also that part of language services suffered from what they called an unfavorable mix of work. Tough to know exactly what that means, but they were also pointing out, you know, some growth areas of the business that they feel quite optimistic and positive about for driving growth into the second half of the year. So they were saying, you know, IP services, language services, both of those two divisions grew on again, won't get too technical, but on an organic constant currency basis. And then the two other divisions, which are the language and content technology, or the LNCT division, and regulated industries, saw their revenues contract over the first half. So yeah, still a mixed bag. Pockets of growth, they said, in linguistic validation, as well as a promising outlook for the data services. I can't remember what it's called right now.
What did it call?
I just blanked. Yeah, I can't remember. Hear the cogs turning. Yeah, and the Evolve, which is the new linguistic AI solution, which kind of groups together a lot of the technologies, the NT, Trados as well.
Train AI.
Train AI, yes, well done.
Yeah, so Evolve is like it's like they're taking parts of their offering, kind of combining it into it. And I saw on the website that you kind of have to, no, you don't have to, but if you're interested, like they kind of pre-qualify you if you're fit for the Evolve product or offering. So yeah, quite interesting.
This would be like the sort of tech-enabled or AI-enabled sort of AI agency version of RWS, do you think?
Yeah, good point. Could be. Hard to unpack all this, but yes, it seems like maybe reduce the complexity a bit and just say, hey, I want this, I want Evolve, as opposed to like, I want this, right? So standardize it a bit. It's probably a good idea. All right. Well, that was it for this week's news podcast. We'll see. I think we might do another podcast next week with a guest, and then we're going to be super busy at SlaterCon. We'll be putting out a ton of content. Put up some short videos, some short interviews with speakers and panelists. So we might take another, maybe 3-4 weeks to come back with a news podcast. But yeah, lots more content on the website and on YouTube. So subscribe, like, and share. Take care.
Bye.